Thank you for the opportunity to present today. As means of introduction, I'm a laboratory head at the University of Melbourne, and my team is mainly focused on STIs, STI research, as well as point-of-care diagnostic innovation. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm presenting to you from today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And in my acknowledgements, I'd like to highlight the fact that here in Australia, our Indigenous communities are severely and disproportionately impacted by a large number of infectious diseases, including STIs. And while the reasons for this are multifactorial and complex, one of the driving reasons is limited access to timely diagnostic testing. So here you can see in these graphs alarming rise in the rates of preventable bacterial STIs in Australia. If we look at syphilis, for example, we've seen over a 350% increase in the number of cases over the last decade. These lower panels here in orange and blue, you can see just how prevalent these infections are amongst our Indigenous communities relative to non-Indigenous communities, and that this prevalence increases and is strongly correlated with how far from a major city these communities reside. Worldwide, we've seen a rise of syphilis in women of reproductive age, and consequently increased cases of congenital syphilis. So congenital syphilis is a major global cause of fetal loss, stillbirth, and neonatal death. And in 2020, we saw 425 cases per 100,000 live births, which is substantially higher than the WHO's elimination target. On the right here, you can see the numbers in Australia that while they're low, they're steadily increasing. And indeed, our cases of congenital syphilis have doubled in recent years. So it's clear that we need early diagnosis of syphilis and that this needs to be done timely to ensure quick treatment and to mitigate transmission. However, we're faced with a global problem where the majority of accurate diagnostics rely on centralized public health laboratories, requiring expensive machinery as well as specialized personnel. And as a consequence, we have limited access in low resource settings and low income settings, where unfortunately we see the greatest prevalence and burden of infection. Here in Australia, it can take over 2 weeks for clinical samples to be processed from our remote regions where our Indigenous communities reside. And we have a very alarmingly small number of testing platforms available. So during outbreaks like the COVID outbreak, a pandemic, we quite rapidly saw critical shortages of reagents lead to extreme delays. If we look at syphilis specifically, there are major barriers to early diagnosis. One of the major ones is that in low resource settings, diagnosis is based on symptomatic diagnosis. However, early syphilis presents with genital ulcers is the symptoms, and this can be clinically indistinguishable from herpes simplex virus. And we're seeing more and more a bias towards diagnosing these infections as herpes simplex virus simply because it's more common. And this has devastating effects. They require different treatments. It delays the right treatment, and we see ongoing transmission. Another barrier is the fact that in Australia, at least, the standard diagnostic test is serological. And so this requires invasive blood collection, which can be a major barrier for certain individuals. Our serological tests, we require 2 because of the limitations of each test. It's quite convoluted. And in well-resourced settings, there is also a 3rd test required, which is PCR-based to detect pathogen nucleic acid. So, as I mentioned, my team is focused on developing new diagnostics, and certainly the WHO has identified the critical need for novel diagnostics and developed what's known as the assured criteria. And these are simply benchmarks that a new diagnostic has to meet. There's been a flurry of innovative methods applied to this application. But they all vary in their ability to meet these specifications. So my team and many others are combining multiple methods to try and achieve optimal performance. So we combine isothermal nucleic acid amplification, which essentially is you're amplifying your target region of DNA or RNA at a single temperature. So all you need is a heat block. And this essentially increases the sensitivity of your assay. And then we couple this with CRISPR technology, which I'll get into on the next slide. But essentially, this inherently brings with it a high level of specificity. So what is CRISPR technology and how is it exploited for diagnostics? Essentially, CRISPR technology exploits a naturally occurring enzymatic reaction that involves two major components. A guide RNA, when introduced to a clinical sample, will find its target region of a matching region of the target sequence and bind to it. This will also recruit a Cas enzyme. And upon complexing with the guide RNA, the Cas enzyme becomes activated in a very specific manner and will cut the target region that the guide is matching to. What's important to note in the context of diagnostics is that this Cas enzyme that got turned on in a very specific manner now remains on and undergoes what's known as collateral cleavage, whereby it can now cleave certain sequences of certain pattern, whether that be A's or U's. And so what you can do is you can introduce a reporter construct that has a fluorescent probe ligated to this sequence pattern and a quencher that is stabilized to stabilize the molecule. And it is upon cleavage of this, upon omission of signal when this reporter is cleaved by the Cas enzyme that we're actually quantifying in the diagnostic test, the signal. And because it's a fluorescent signal, we can use multiple different readouts depending on the use case. So to complete the picture, if your clinical sample is negative, doesn't have the pathogen of interest, the guide RNA has nothing to bind to, the CRISPR enzyme remains inactive, and your reporter intact. So this is very specific. What's really exciting about CRISPR technology is that it's highly amendable. So you can introduce multiple guide RNAs to target multiple regions of the sequence, of the pathogen sequence, and now you're dual or triple targeting. And this is very useful to avoid diagnostic escape. The second thing is you can introduce Cas enzymes with different properties. So one might target RNA, another DNA, and in this way you can start multiplexing the detection of multiple different pathogens. So this is certainly what my team has been doing. We've developed a suite of CRISPR-based tests for the detection of STIs. They're all performed on this point of care instrument, sorry. And essentially, pathogens are multiplex, so we're targeting 2 pathogens at a time. The clinical on the instrument itself, it undergoes that initial amplification isothermal step, and then the output of this is introduced to the Cas reaction to introduce the specificity, and this is all performed on this instrument in under an hour. So just to show you one of the test types. So one of the test types is treponema pallidum detection for syphilis, and this is multiplexed with HSV to be able to distinguish between these infections that present similarly. And then this test can be reflexed to distinguish between HSV1 and HSV2 in situations that you had a positive for HSV1. one of the bottlenecks, I guess, and the limiting factors in designing these assays is that it's quite complex to design the primers and the guide RNAs, because essentially you want to ensure that the region is conserved amongst circulating strands of your pathogen of interest, but not in non-target pathogens. And then you will need to make sure that they meet the specifications that you need for the primers and the CRISPR reaction. And so to overcome this, our team has developed PathoGD. This is available on GitHub, and it's, we believe, really useful to rapidly generate a list of candidate primers and guides, and it can certainly be used in conjunction with PCR as well. So using that pipeline, we generated our candidates, screened them, and then interrogated the best performing guides and primers for our test. The first question we wanted to answer was, well, how sensitive is the assay? And determine the limit of detection. So we introduced a serial dilution of control treponema pallidum and HSV DNA. And we're pleased to see that this serial dilution was detected and that we were detecting single copies of all of our pathogens of interest. The second question we had was, how specific is the assay? And to answer this question, we introduced a panel of non-target but clinically relevant bacterial and viral gDNA or RNA and into the test. And we're very pleased to see no cross-reactivity with other pathogens. So the next question was, well, the next aim really was to validate this using real clinical samples. So here in Melbourne, I sit in the Doherty Institute, and my lab is co-localized with the Victorian Infectious Disease Reference Laboratory. And this is where all the clinical samples come collected, specimens come for diagnostic testing. And so we had access to over 400 residual clinical samples shared with us, and they included samples collected from a range of relevant anatomical sites. So we extracted DNA, gDNA, and performed the concordance analysis. And so the concordance analysis involved comparing the performance of our CRISPR assay with qPCR. And while qPCR is not the gold standard for diagnostic testing in Australian public health services, it is the assay that is accepted for detecting DNA and RNA directly rather than an antigen-based test. So this was more comparative. We were pleased to see that we had detected high numbers of true positives, reaching a sensitivity above 90, close to 95% across for all of the viral targets, with a slight reduction for the detection of treponema pallidum in sensitivity, but that this performance still sat within the target product profile created by the WHO for point of care test. And we were really pleased to see that the CRISPR aspect of our assays was introducing very impressive levels of specificity, pretty much 100%. Well, we were interested in looking closer at why this drop in sensitivity. And so here in this image, you can see that the comparison of performance of our CRISPR assay on the y-axis to the qPCR on the x-axis. And essentially all there is to take from this graph is that the green dots are individual clinical samples that we correctly called positive in the CRISPR assay, and these gray dots are the ones we missed in the treponema pallidum and the HSV test. what I want to bring your attention to is these bar graphs here. This shows you the distribution of essentially what the pathogen load was for the whole cohort of samples we were provided, so unblinded at this point. On the x-axis, we have the CT results from the qPCR, whereby the higher the CT value, the lower the pathogen load. And what you can see clearly is that the cohort provided generally had much lower pathogen loads for the Treponema pallidum samples. Now, this is not surprising. We know that bacterial infections generally have a lower load, and this is how they present as an infection compared to viral samples. But what was important for us was actually that the assay itself wasn't performing differently. We were still achieving that same limit of a detection across the board, but inherently there was bias there because of the clinical presentation. So this can't be ignored. If this is what we need to detect, this is what we need to detect. And certainly we're doing further work to improve our assay to bring that sensitivity up. But like I mentioned, we're still within the range of what's required of a point of care test. We're really pleased that the assay is performed in under 45 minutes on a genuinely portable device. It relies on swab collection, bypassing the need for intravenous blood collection, and if implemented, will be the first point of care test for syphilis multiplex with HSV. We're really excited to progress the project. We're now optimizing ways to not require that initial extraction of DNA step to go straight from clinical samples. And we're soon to start field studies with our collaborative partners at the Melbourne Sexual Health Centre here in Victoria, which is a sexual health clinic. The story continues, again, in collaboration with the Melbourne Sexual Health Centre, where we're now trying to tripleplex our assay. Globally, we've seen outbreaks of Mpox, our second wave of 2024, and monkeypox virus or Mpox infection presents as genital ulcers as well. And so by triplexing syphilis with HSV and Mpox, we hope to cover the majority of infections that present similarly. And then our aim upon developing this assay is to really evaluate our performance versus symptomatic diagnosis by clinicians and try and answer that question of, well, can we identify cases of syphilis and Mpox that would have otherwise been missed? So I'm quite excited to see this work move forward as well. So I'd like to end there. I appreciate your time. A number of people have contributed to this work. And my team is always interested in collaborating. So please feel free to email me if you feel that we can add value to your work or if you have an idea for a point of care test application. Thank you very much.